Good morning once again, guys. So we've come to the last part of module three, which is arithmetic pipeline design. Okay, so to give a brief recap, we saw what is a linear pipeline, where you have data move from one stage to the next and all the way to the end. And we also saw something on non-linear pipeline where we will actually have feed forward and feedback systems where you can actually pass the data in and around the pipeline apart from the streamline data passing. Okay, and then we saw about instruction pipeline design, and more into that we saw about static and dynamic scheduling, so how the instructions are scheduled so that you avoid the hazards and you actually make even better use of your pipeline, right? So by avoiding stalls. Now we have come to the arithmetic pipeline design. Okay, so arithmetic pipeline, as the name suggests, it has to do with the actual ALU itself. Okay, ALU is just one portion of your CPU, correct? So previously we were seeing the entire CPU as a whole, as a pipeline, but in this, the arithmetic pipeline focuses just on the execution stage. Okay, so there is an execute stage, and we saw earlier that execute stage could be like three or four stages by itself. Correct. So there are sub stages in execute stage. That's what we have seen earlier. So now we will see why is that the case, and we will explore more into that. First, we will have some basics, or more like a refresher about the arithmetic, right? So in computers, we only have finite precision arithmetic. Okay. However, in real world, that is not the case, right? So, for example, if you do 1 divided by 3, so in real world the output will be 0.333333, and it just goes on forever to infinity. Correct. So the In computer we cannot afford infinite decimal precision. We have to stop at some point because we are limited by the hardware. Okay, if it's a 64-bit register, so we can only have let us say we reserve 64 bits to represent the decimals. Then we can have precision only up to 64 decimal point. Correct. So we also had a few bugs in our processors, which led to big catastrophe. Okay, so because there was some round of error that happened in some decimal place that propagated and that resulted in like a different number altogether. So all these are limitations of the computer generated arithmetic, but that's the best that we have, right? So we can't afford again to have infinite decimal points. So that's what you mean by finite precision arithmetic. And you also have to deal with overflow and underflow. Okay, so what is overflow and what is underflow? So overflow is when you actually have two positive numbers being added. Okay, and then you have a negative result. Seems like it's like when, I mean, you'd be surprised why would that happen, and that's because you reserve the last bit as a sign bit, right? So you generally work on two's complement, where when the most significant bit actually represents the sign. So in some sense, if you add two big numbers, two positive numbers, you might end up in actually having the most significant bit set, which will yield a negative number. So that's the overflow part. So underflow is just the opposite of that. Okay, so you also deal with these kind of things in your computers. So you have to make sure that the result that you compute is indeed correct. So you need to have some flag that tracks the inputs and then the output and then raises the flag appropriately, right? So broadly, we have two kinds of arithmetic operations in our systems. So first one is fixed point operations, and this is what we are generally used to, right? So we come across it in everyday life too. Okay, so fixed point arithmetic says that, as the name suggests, right? So if you have like a 16-bit number, you actually fix the decimal point at some place, and then you don't move it. Okay, so you choose that precision even before anything starts. So you just say, hey, I have 16 bits, I will reserve 8 bits for my the actual integer portion, and I'll reserve the other 8 bits for the fractional portion, okay, or the decimal portion after the decimal point, right? So you can actually play around with the decimals. So you can have only one decimal point, or you can have two decimal points. So you have to sacrifice on the integer portion of it though. Okay, but that's how the fixed point operations work. So generally we have the signed magnitude, and we have signed magnitude is nothing but you reserve one bit for sign, and the rest of the uh, rest of the bits just give you the number. It's exactly like how we represent the number system, right? Minus 10. So 10 is actually the portion. So 10 could be a minus 10 or a plus 10, right? So depending on what sign you put. So that's the most what to say, the basic or fundamental notation that we use. However, in computers, we generally use ones complement and more predominantly two's complement notation. And so two's complement is what is currently used in widely used in all the existing systems, because of its inherent property of changing the signs. Okay, so you can actually work out a two's complement arithmetic and find out that naturally it actually supports the signs. Okay, so it actually, when you add when you add and subtract, it actually complements it very well. So if I just have to brief you on that, it's just going to look like this, right? So see, if you have some kind of a clock, it's going to look like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, consider this. Then what you have is actually you can divide this into two halves. So one the positive numbers and the negative numbers. Okay, so 0 represents 0, 1 represents 1, 2 represents 2, 3 represents 3. Okay, and then 7 represents minus 1. Okay, and this is minus 2, and this is minus 3, and we have one extra number minus 4, because you count 0 as a positive number. Okay, so this is where the overflow and underflow happens. Okay, when you cross this, so when you actually add two numbers, if you say 3 plus 3, you actually go this side, right? So it becomes an overflow. So that's what happens. So but this is what your two's complement is all about. Okay, so if you have to arithmetically calculate two's complement, what do you do? So you just invert the number, right? So for example, if you have 2, you represent it by 0, 1, 0, right? So but if you want to calculate minus 2, you invert the bits and add 1, right? So it becomes 1, 0, 1, plus 1. So it will become 0 and then 1 carry. So you have 1 and then 1. So which is nothing but your 6, right? So your 6 is actually minus 2. So that's what we have here. Clear? So that's why I said, so actually naturally it supports the arithmetic as well. Okay, so when you actually add something to 6 also, it actually becomes very natural. So you add 1 to 6, it becomes 7, but again it also becomes minus 1 here. Okay, so minus 2 plus 1 will become minus 1, right? So that's actually very nice. Any questions on this, guys? So understood two's complement, right? Okay. So now coming to addition. So how do you do addition of fixed point numbers? So you have two n bits, and then when you add two n bits, the output will be n bit, correct? But there is also going to be a one bit output, which we call it as carry, correct? And similarly, when you have to do subtraction, or if you want to calculate the difference, it's the same. Okay, so you subtract n bit from another n bit, so you get an n bit output, and along with a carry. Okay, what about product? What about multiplication? Can anyone say what happens during multiplication? Let's see. You can say. Mm, Surabhi?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what happens during a product a multiplication? When you multiply two n bit numbers, what's the output?
Don't know, sir.
What happens, right? So I'll give you the clue, right? So if you add two n bit numbers, the output is also going to be n bit. Okay. If you subtract
Yes.
one n bit number from the another n bit number, you get again an n bit number and a carry, right? Now similarly for product, if you multiply two n bit numbers, what's your output? You can get help. You want to take some help?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. Don't hesitate. It's okay.
So if Rachna would be there.
Who?
Rachna?
Rachna. Rachna.
Yes, sir.
Can you help Surabhi?
Sir, I think if two numbers have n and n bits, I think the multiplication would give n plus n,
N plus n. What is n plus n?
2n.
2n. Great. Nice. See, there you go. Thanks, Rachna. Surabhi, did you learn?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Isn't it obvious?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And then when you actually do a division of a 2n bit number by an n bit number, you get n bit number quotient. Okay. And you also get n bit number reminder. Okay. So that's about your fixed point operations. Okay, so now coming to the other part, which is floating point operations. So floating point numbers are generally uh, floating point numbers were introduced by IEEE. So this is IEEE 754 standard, and because you don't want to fix the decimal point to lose precision. For example, one day I decide I need only 3 bits after my decimal point. Okay, but later I have a request for some scientific computing. I need 7 bits. What do I do? I cannot change my hardware, right? So that is what has made us come up with a floating decimal point, where you can actually, depending on your use case, right? You can actually float the decimal point. For example, it's going to be like this. I'm just putting zeros here. But you can decide I will have only my decimal point here. So which means I need only 1 bit after my decimal point. Okay. So which means I can represent the remaining, say, 7 bits or so, right? Like how much do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So remaining 7 bits I can use for my uh, the actual integer portion. Okay, but sometimes I may require like very high precision. So in that case, I can actually move around. I can say, okay, I don't want one decimal point. I know I need 6 decimal points. So you can do this also. Okay, and you can do anything. You can actually do everything in between, and that's what has created a lot of advancement, and at the same time, it has created a lot of challenges too. Okay, so now how do you make the computer understand this, right? The hardware level. So that's what your floating point number is all about. Okay, so if you, I mean, one practical way we have all used floating point numbers is, of course, the float, right? Float instruction type in C programming. If you have other, I mean, even in Java you have float, I think, right? So, so that's where you actually use float. So you have to explicitly say it is a float, so that you know where to put the decimal point. And I mean, the computer actually takes care of the rest of the things, but you have to decide that this is going to be a floating point number. So here the representation is something like this, right? It's again something that we have seen in our school days. So floating point numbers are generally represented by M and E, the mantissa and the exponent part. Okay, this is same as the scientific notation, right? So in scientific notation, what do you have? So you have mantissa and then exponent. So generally you see you represent something like this, right? 3.3 into 10 to the power of 27. Okay, so this 10 is the radix. Okay, in computers we generally use decimals, right? So it becomes 2 there, so that's not a big deal. So but then to understand, so this becomes your mantissa portion, 3.3, right? And 27 becomes the exponent portion. But in computer, again, you don't have this 3.3, which again, I mean, it will just add to confusion, right? So what we do is we represent the decimals as this, right? So it's always after decimal. Okay, whatever, it's always 0.33. Okay, and then which means it will become 10 to the power 26, right? 0.33 into 10 to the power 28. Okay, so this is how you generally represent. You always have whatever is in the mantissa portion is after the decimal point. So here you can have, so if you say this is 8 bits, then you can have all 8 bits precision here. Okay, and then you have another set to just represent the exponent part. So this is how you represent the floating point. So depending on this value, you can play around with the decimal point. Okay, so how many zeros you want, so that one you can decide here. So this is what actually gives you the floating decimal point. Clear? I hope you have studied all this in your computer organization in earlier semester, but just a refresher, right? So m is the mantissa, okay, or the fraction. So it's always 0 point something. And then there is this exponent part, e, with radix or base, that is r. So in general we always in hardware we have decimal, mean sorry, binary as the representation. Okay, base is always 2. So the actual value you represent it like this: x is nothing but m into r power e, right? So like our scientific notation. So you have two things here. One is single precision, which is 32 bits as represented in this figure here. Okay, so the topmost bit is the sign bit, and then 8 bits you have for exponent, and the remaining bits you have for mantissa. But this was again, as the advancement in the scientific community was more, and then there was a demand for higher precision. You actually doubled these bits, so it became a double precision, which is 64 bit. Okay. So now coming to the floating point operations, similar to what we saw in the earlier slide, right, for fixed point operations. So the addition, there's a small change in addition, right? So you cannot simply add the mantissa of two different floating point numbers. So you have to do something else extra. So let us say you want to add 3.3 into 10 power 5, and then 4.2 into 10 power 8. So you can't simply add these, right? Because so this is some big number. Okay, and this is like a smaller number compared to this is only like so this comes to 33 followed by 1 2 3 4 zeros, correct? And then but this one is actually 42 followed by 7 zeros, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So actually if you add it, it becomes something like this, correct? So now you cannot simply add the mantissa portion. You cannot say 3.3 plus 4.2. You can't do that. So what should you do? You actually to normalize this. Okay, you have to normalize this to either one of the floating point numbers. So one way to do this is you bring down 4.2 like this, right? So you actually make it uh, you make 4.2, bringing it down. So you actually have uh, yeah, what do you have here? So 42 followed by uh, how do you bring this on? Hey, sorry, I got confused now. Okay, so what do you do is you actually have my. So my will be your same 33,000, right? But rather what you have to actually uh, bring down ay. Wait a minute. I just got carried away. So what do? You have 44, 42, 4.2 into 10 to the power of 8 minus 5, right? So you actually make it into 10 power 5 only, and then multiply both to 33. Hey, what is this? Big power. You do 3.3 into 10 power 5, and then got it. Sorry, guys. I just got confused. Okay. So what you do essentially is you actually normalize these two, just like what we do here, right? So you actually make both of them 10 to the power 5. Okay. So you take 10 power 4, right? So 10 power 4 is the common part. So if you take 10 power 4 out, so what you'll have here is your 10 power 4 will come out, and then inside this you will have your 42 into 10 power 3, right? So into 10 power 3, and then you have your 33. So you actually can do this addition. Okay, so it essentially becomes 42,000 plus 33. Okay, and then you actually have to take out the 10 power 4 outside. Okay, so essentially what you're doing is you're normalizing the exponent part. Okay, you're bringing them both down to the lowest exponent part that is common. Okay, so in this case it becomes 33 into 10 power 4, right? And then here you can actually make 42 into 10 power 8 or 10 power 7 as 42,000, 42 followed by 3 zeros, and then you can also into 10 power 4. Okay, so you bring that out, so you take that as common, so it becomes your 42,000 plus 33. Okay, so then you have your sum 033 into 10 power 4. Okay, so that's how you do the floating point addition. Okay, clear? Any questions on this, guys? Okay, now similarly you do the subtraction part also. Okay, subtraction is the same thing. Instead of the add, you actually have to do subtract, but rest of the logic remains the same. Okay, now coming to multiplication. Now, how do you multiply? So fairly, actually, multiplication is easier in floating point, right? So if you pick the same example, like say for 42 into 10 power 6, and then 33 into 10 power 3. So it's actually it's easier. You don't have to do any normalization here. So simply what you can do is 42 into 33 into 10 power 3 into 10 power 6, right? So this actually becomes, oh sorry, it's not 10 power 2 into 10 power 6. So it actually becomes uh Yeah, it actually becomes 10 power 20, 10 power 6. So it actually becomes 10 to the power 9. 3 plus 6, it becomes 9 here. And then you actually have to do 42 times 33. Okay. So this will become your mantissa portion and this will become your exponent portion. Okay. So it's actually fairly simple to do multiplication in floating point. And then you have your division also goes the same way. The only thing is now you divide, but then you subtract the exponent part, not add the exponent part. Okay, so this is how you do arithmetic in floating point. And apart from that, you also have some transcendental functions, like you can also have trigonometric, exponential, logarithmic, so many other functions. Even square root is available. Okay, so there is a square root function. You have a hardware for square root to calculate the square root based on whichever base you are interested in. Right. So these are the different floating point operations on numbers. Okay. Any questions on this? Is this clear? Have you had this in your computer organizations course, guys? Hey, guys, is it clear? Am I audible? Okay. All right. So let's move on. So when you actually put it in hardware, right? So you need, so since we have seen that the arithmetic for fixed point is different from that of floating point, so you also need separate units for fixed point and separate units for floating point. You actually sometimes some of the processors have a co-processor for floating point operations. So floating point is actually very uh, involved, and it's very hardware intensive or compute intensive, so you actually need specialized hardware for those. And then you can have either scalar or vector arithmetic pipelines. Okay. And it can be unifunctional or static pipelines, or it could be dynamic as well. Okay. And then this is what we are going to focus on, the arithmetic pipeline stages. Okay. So we will see that it's not just one step process to actually compute the sum or product. It's actually multi-step process, and once you have more than one step, it is actually beneficial if you start doing pipelines, right? Especially if the stages are independent, you can divide the operation into different phases independent of each other, then you can actually pipeline to get better output. So mainly your add and shift are the fundamental operations involved in arithmetic pipelines. Okay, coming to the add portion, so you can actually have two types of additions that are there. Right, one is carry propagate adder, and the other is carry save adder. So these are two different ways of adding things. So how is that? So how are you going to add it in a different way? So addition is just a simple logic, right? But in any case, you also have to use shift register, and this is especially useful when you have to do multiplication, right? So mainly addition and shifting are the two main operations that you can use to implement any arithmetic operation. So we'll just look at how to do a multiplication in a pipeline. Okay, so we are going to add two 8-bit numbers, and as Rachana confirmed, it's going to be 16-bit product using as CSA and CPA Wallace tree. Okay, so we'll see how is this done. So now let's first have the distinction between what a carry propagation is versus carry save addition is. Okay, so carry propagation is something that we are all familiar with, and that is how we do addition even today, right? When you want to add numbers, you do it this way, right? So let us say you take a plus b, you're going to do 1 plus 1 equal to 2, right? So it becomes 1 0, it becomes 0 and 1 goes to carry. Okay, so that is how you do, right? So 1 plus 1 is 0 and 1 carry. 1 plus 1 is 3. So 1 and then 1 carry. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Then again 1 carry. 1 plus 1 is 2 again. So it becomes 1, 0. So this one comes here. So that is how you compute, right? So your carry, if you see, your carry always propagates. So what happens here, you computed the sum. 1 plus 1 is 1, 0. But this 1 has propagated to the next bit. Okay, and now we are doing a sum. So in some sense, it's not just fundamentally at the bit level, it is not, you're not adding 2 bits, you're actually adding 3 bits. Okay, every time, if you notice, at any stage you will add 3 bits, a and then b, and then there is a carry also. Okay, so you always add. So here you add 1 plus 1 plus 1 becomes 3. That's the maximum number you can get, right? Which is still a 2-bit number. Okay, so you have 1 as the output, but this one again goes as a carry. So if you see, your carry always propagates. Okay, and then this carry will propagate, it will become 1 here. Okay, so this is your carry propagation. It's also called as ripple carry addition. So there are multiple ways to do this carry propagate addition. So the widely known one is the ripple carry, so where you ripple it through. The problem with this is that this bit, right? So addition is not complete until this bit has, your carry has propagated up to this bit. Okay, so which means that you have to wait. Let us say if it's a 4-bit number, it's okay. Let us say if it's a 64-bit number, if you add two 64-bit numbers, if every clock cycle takes if every bit takes one clock cycle, then you have to wait for 64 clock cycles to get that one bit, right? Your addition, you have to wait for 64 clocks. Okay, I'm just exaggerating here a bit, but then you get the idea, right? Even though that all the other bits are set, you still have to wait for one more propagation, so it has to ripple through an entire series of bits. Okay, so to avoid this, so there are numerous ways to improve the adder design. Okay, so one is called as carry save addition. So here you have three n-bit inputs. We'll call it x, y, and z. Okay, and it is represented like this, right? So x0, x1, all the way to xn minus 1. Okay, and so on. So this is how your y and z are also going to be represented. And then interestingly, you will have two n-bit outputs. Okay, in carry save addition. Okay, so that's a bit confusing. We'll see why is that. So this is the example for carry save addition. Okay, so what you have here is the logic. Okay, so all you're going to deal with is a logic. Now if you think what is going to be the logic, it's going to be something very simple that we have already seen in your bit operations, right? In your earlier digital logic class. So we'll represent your intermediate sum by this, right? SB. SB is nothing but S naught all the way to Sn minus 1, and there is a dummy bit here. And then later you have your carry vector. Okay, so SB is the bitwise sum, and C is the carry vector. Goes from it starts with a 0 because carry in you assume it to be a 0, and then C1 all the way to Cn, right? So now how are we going to represent the bits? If you notice, your sum bit, right, whatever you're going to calculate as sum is nothing but your XOR operation. Okay, so if you do the sum manually also, what you will get is 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3, right? So you have 1 as carry and 1 here. Okay, and then what you have here, 1. So if you leave the carry aside, then if you just see 1, right, so it's just going to be 1, and if it's going to be 0 1 1, it's going to be 0. Okay, so now if you just omit all the carry portion of it, you're just dividing it into the sum portion and carry portion. The sum portion is calculated by simply looking at xyz and then XORing these bits. Okay, what is XOR? XOR just counts odd or even, that's all, right? If it's odd, it's going to give you 1. If it's even, it's going to give you 0. That's all it is. Okay, XOR operation it's a good test for to check whether the number is odd or even, right? Given set of ones. So if the number of ones here is actually odd, then you get 1. If the number of ones here is even, then you get a 0. So at one step you can get all the sum bits, right? In just one step you just have to do XOR of these and then you get the output for some bit. But for the carry bit, it's a little bit it's a little bit tricky here. So what you have to do is it's nothing but x I y I or y I z I or z I x I. Okay, so with this logic, so it's only when will you get carry, right? You get carry only if any of the two bits or all three bits are 1. Correct, that is when you get a carry. So that is what the logic, if you simplify that logic, you get this. Okay, any of the two bits is 1, at least any of the two bits is 1, then you get a carry. You will not get a carry if all of them are 0 or any one of the bit is just 1. Okay, so with that you get the logic for carry, you get in just one shot. Okay, in just one step you get carry also. Now what do you have? From adding 3 n-bit numbers, you have produced sum and carry. The output, you have 2 n-bit numbers now. Okay, you have reduced it. So that is what is very, very important. Okay, so you have reduced the input bits from 3, I mean input integers from 3 to 2. Okay, so what it essentially means is if you want to do a huge bits of addition, what you can do is you can actually have a you can actually, let us say you want to do uh, add, like say 12 numbers. Okay, if you want to add 12 integers together, then you can actually divide them into 3 3 3, right? 3 3 3 and then 3. Okay, so this one you give it to one carry save adder, this one you give it to one carry save, this one you carry, this one you give it to one carry save adder, the output of which will become like 2 2 2 2, right? Okay, so now you combine this and then you actually give this, so 2 4 6 8, correct? So now you give 3 3 and then 2, correct? So now, so what you're doing is you're actually reducing it, but ultimately finally what you will have is, when it boils down to 3 inputs, and then you just give it to one CSA and then you get 2 outputs, and these 2 outputs you give it to final one carry propagate adder. Okay, at the last stage you will give it to one carry propagate adder and you will get the final sum. Okay, so in other words, what you can say is, with this, right, with this carry save adder, you can have n number of your sum bits and carry bits. Okay, but finally what you have to do, you have to calculate the final sum based on a simple carry propagate adder SB plus C. Final, there has to be one more level of addition. Any questions? Any questions on this? Okay, but in the previous slide we talked about multiplication, right? But we just saw addition here. Why is that? So we will discuss it in a bit. We are going to look at multiplication, but then we are going to do multiplication in stages using your carry save adder. Okay, we will see how we will do that. So now we are going to consider multiplication of two 8-bit integers producing 16-bit output. Okay, 16-bit product. So we have A times B is product P. In other words, your A times B, you can also say that it is nothing but sum of all partial products. Now what is partial products? You're going to do A times B, right? Let's look at this example. What's happening here? So here, if you see, this is our normal multiplication, right? This is what we do in even on a pen on a paper. So what you do is you will just have A. Okay, so this is multiplicand and then this is your multiplier. So you actually start with your initial bits. Okay, so if this bit is 1, you just copy this as it is. Okay, you just copy A as it is. Okay, your multiplicand should just be copied if the multiplier bit is 1 here. Okay, so now we are done with this bit. So now we'll go to the next bit. Okay, the moment you go to the next bit, you have to do one shift. Okay, you do a shift, you insert a 0. Okay, and then when this is a 1, you again copy your multiplicand. Okay, A is copied again. All right, so now in the second step, you insert two zeros, and if the multiplier bit is 0, you just have to insert 0 here. Okay, because 0 multiplied by any number is 0, right? So you actually put 0, and then you insert 3 zeros and you do the same. Okay, and then you insert 4 zeros and you do the same, and then you have 5 zeros and you do the same. Okay, 6 zeros, you do the same, and then you have 7 zeros and you do the same. Okay, so each one of this can be done independently, correct? Any partial product, let us take this partial product P4. P4 partial product means I will put 4 zeros. Okay, and then and I'll check the bit here. Okay, I'll check the fourth bit, 0, 1, 2, 3, fourth bit. Fourth bit is 1. So if that bit is a 1, then I will copy my multiplicand. Okay, so my multiplicand is just copied. Now it also means that your P1 is going to be how many bits? 8 bits. Okay, and P1 is going to be 8 plus 1 bits equal to 9 bits. Why 1 bit? Because you are inserting one 0, correct? There's one extra 0. This is always 8. Okay, irrespective of your multiplier being 0 or not, you're going to put either zeros or your multiplicand, right? It's always going to be 8-bit number. So there's always going to be an 8-bit number plus the number of zeros depending on which partial product you are working at. If you take P4, you can simply say that it is going to be 8 bits plus you're going to have 4 zeros, right? So 4 bits. So 8 plus 4, 12 bits. Okay. So that's how it's the partial bits will actually grow from 8, 9, and then you have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 bits. Each one will be that many bits long, and when you do all the addition, finally, okay, so you will have one more carry, so it makes it a 16-bit product. Okay, so this is how you get, when you multiply two 8-bit numbers, you get a 16-bit number. Clear? So this is clear, right? So now what is happening? So now you understood how partial products are calculated. It's just you put the number of zeros and you either copy the multiplicand or put zeros there also. Okay, depending on the multiplier bit. Now after this it becomes simple addition, correct? You just have to add all the partial products. You just do one big addition, then you get the final product. And like I said, right, so you have now 8 numbers to add. Okay, so multiplication of two 8-bit numbers simply means addition of 8 integers, okay, of varying bit sizes. So that's also something to keep in mind. Okay, not all 8 numbers are same bits. Okay, you have to keep that in mind. Now with this you can construct a tree using carry save adder. Okay, so that's the tree here is called as the Wallace tree, named after the scientist who actually came up with this, designed this. Okay, so here if you see what you have here, so you have this multiplier recoding logic. So basically what you are doing here is calculating the partial product. All the PI's are calculated here. Okay, in one step you can calculate, correct? So you just have to insert zeros and then put 0 or put the multiplicand, that's all, right? So you calculate, so all your partial products are calculated here. Now what do you do? So you have your, this is your, remember, this is your 8-bit number, this is your 9-bit number, this is your 10-bit number, and so on, right? So you group these three together, and then you group these three together, and then finally you're left with only two. Okay, so you give this to one carry save adder, you give this to one carry save adder, and you give this to one carry save adder. Okay, because carry save adder takes three inputs and it will give you two outputs. Okay, so now that is what is happening here. So you take the first three, 8 9 10, right, the first three partial products. Okay, so this is your p0, this is p1, this is p2, this is p3, p4, p5, p6 and p7. Okay, now you're grouping p0, p1, p2 together, giving it to a carry save adder. The output of this carry save adder is going to be 10 bits. Why? Because you're going to take the maximum of these three, right? Even though this is 8 9, so you consider these three probably as three 10-bit inputs, so you will get a 10-bit output. Okay, but you will not get 10-bit sum. What you get is a 10-bit a partial sum, and you get a 10-bit carry also. Okay, in just one step you can get that. Clear? Similarly, you group 11, 12, 13 partial products 3, 4 and 5, right? So this will be 11-bit, 12-bit, 13 bits. So you give that to another carry save adder whose output is going to be a 13-bit sum and 13-bit carry. Okay, so one is sum, one is carry. Okay, so now what you're going to do, it's the magic of this is that you can actually play around with this. You can actually send this carry here and this sum here to different adders. Still the output is going to be correct only, because it's just partial sums, right? You're just going to add these two. It really doesn't matter which adder is adding those two. So it becomes a partial sum to another carry save adder. Okay, so these three you will pass it on to one carry save adder, and then so you get these two to another carry save adder. Okay, now this becomes another stage. This is your stage 2. Stage 1 is simply your calculating of partial product, and this is your stage 2. Every stage is interleaved by a register or latch. Okay, latch or flip flops, so that you buffer it and you supply a clock. Okay, so why are we doing this? Because in this time when CSA is calculating the partial sums and carry, you can do the second multiplication here. Okay, in this will be another set of partial product that is coming into picture. So you are going to pipeline this. That's the entire idea, remember? So this we are talking about arithmetic pipeline. So that's why you interleave it with all these registers. So anyway, so coming back to this, right? So what you have here is again your two 13-bit outputs and two 15-bit outputs. Okay, again you take that and give it to another carry save adder, and you give it to another carry save. So you have like a tree of carry save additions, and finally what you have is only 2 bits. Okay, the SB and your C, correct? So finally it will always come to your two outputs. That's what your carry save adder does. Even though it converges, it always converges to like two outputs, and those two outputs you give it to one carry propagate adder or a ripple carry adder or something, and you get the output here. Okay, one product you will get. Understood? Any questions on this, guys? Is this clear? Is it clear how the tree is constructed? Okay, okay, great. So next we move on to the next topic. It's multifunctional pipeline. Okay, so multifunctional pipeline means, so you have your arithmetic logic unit, right? So you have your ALU. In that ALU, you should have facility to do addition, multiplication, and whatnot, right? Whatever operations you have. So you're going to pipeline it. Okay, so how do we pipeline this is the question. One way to do it is static multifunctional pipeline, and then the other one is dynamic multifunctional pipeline. So the idea behind this is same as what we saw in your instruction pipeline, where you can be either static scheduling or dynamic scheduling, right? So it can be in any way, but here we'll focus only on the static pipeline. So we'll take the case study of TI's ASE. It's a typo here. It's TI. TI's ASE static multifunctional pipeline. So the idea is this, right? So you have first you actually have all these operands x, y, z's, and you have multiple copies. I mean, you have a shadow copy of the same, okay, as intermediate registers. You maintain two copies at any given time. And what is important here is that this is your entire ALU. Okay, so this is your entire ALU, and in that you have different arithmetic units. Okay, so each one is a pipeline. Okay, so one could be your adder, one could be your addition, one could be your multiplication, one could be your, this would be fixed point multiplication, this could be your floating point multiplication, this could be your square root, okay, and so on. Okay, so it can be any of these here. Okay, so each one is your arithmetic pipeline now, and at a time you can choose any one. Okay, so we're, since this is a static pipeline, you're not going to have any complex things here, because control will also get complex. So what you do is, out of all these functional units, you select, hey, now I'm going to do multiplication, then you select this, and all these things will be disabled. Okay, until your pipeline finishes, everything else will be disabled, and you get back to it. Okay, it's one of the preliminary ways to pipeline things. So something like this, right? You choose the control in such a way that your stages, so if you notice in the previous figure, so you have 8 stages in these pipelines. All these pipelines will have 8 stages. Okay, but you may not use all the 8 stages, right? So for example, if you see here, pipeline stage, you have multiplication for fixed point multiplication, and this is a floating point dot product. So in fixed point multiplication, you may not use these intermediate stages, so you just do what to say, you actually bypass these stages. Okay, and so these are individually different pipelines. Okay, and you actually enable one of them depending on what instruction you are dealing with. Okay, so any questions? So if not, we're actually done with this module. So we come to the close of module 3. Okay, thank you guys.